And it is Wednesday. No, it's not. March 10th. Sorry, I'm in the wrong tab. It is Wednesday, June 9th,
Yes.
2022. 2020. Oh my gosh, this isn't good.
I want to start over.
I don't know where that happened. Personnel board meeting, June 9th, 2021. Thank you. At 12 p.m. We gavelled in at 12:02.
Betsy, Vanessa wants to say something quick.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Vanessa.
I just wanted to note the town moderator is in the audience and he has his hand raised.
Certainly.
Shall I bring him over?
Sure. I got to read the statement into the record first, though. Paul, if you could wait a moment, I'm going to read a statement into the record unless you want to supersede the governor's order.
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. Oh, would our clerk, Ms. Jasinski, like to read the required statement into the record?
Sure, Betsy.
Thank you,
Pursuant to
Dorian.
Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner: by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com. Oh my goodness, I'm as bad as Betsy today. /remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jasinski. A few notes. We are being recorded. All votes will be by roll call, and the chair sees a majority of the members present, herself, Ms. Jasinski, Mr. Rubenstein. For the record, Ms. Hale, would you tell us who else is present from town employees, boards, and committees?
Sure. In addition to the town moderator, Jason Malinowski, Kathy Cook, Paul Sabelli, Ryan Donovan, and Tim Davis.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hale. We have a quorum, and I believe we have a special matter not on the agenda, but Mr. Semino is here and he wishes to address us. You have the floor, Mr. Semino.
Yes, and thank you, Vanessa, for noticing me and letting me jump in, because I had no idea this meeting was, I knew there was a meeting. I had no idea that it would be so well attended and have so many VIPs attached to it. And it wasn't my intention to sort of step on this meeting, so I'm going to do it in 30 seconds and get off. I was just coming in because I wanted to say something I wish I had more opportunity to say, which is I appreciate my appointees on the personnel board who are coming to the end. We're coming to the end of another fiscal year. There'll be reappointments made, et cetera. But I don't get a chance to thank my appointees enough on all the boards that I appoint. So I wanted to just come on to this meeting and do that. And I suppose I just did. But to Betsy and Dorian and Barry, especially, it's good to see you. I'm glad to see you. I have nothing to say other than thank you and looking forward to another productive year for this board. So that's the reason I came on. I'm going to see myself out at this point because it sounds like you have a lot to do. So the only other thing I would say is, as soon as you're back in an actual room together, I would like to know. I assume that's coming soon because it's always good to see people for real. So,
Our
I'll throw it back to you.
upcoming meetings are, Mr. Moderator, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your attendance. Our upcoming meetings are June 23rd, 2021 and July 14th, 2021. From the meeting notice, you will know the location and whether they will continue to be virtual. Something we're going to be discussing with Ms. Hale a little later in the meeting. But please
right.
follow our
Look forward to
agendas for
that.
those dates, and we look forward to seeing you in person as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, carry on. Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on 2A, approval of minutes. These are in your packet at pages 1 to 4. The minutes having been circulated to the board, reading is waived. Are there any comments or changes on the minutes as circulated in the packet? I see a shake of heads. None. There being no comments or changes, the minutes are approved by the chair as presented in the packet. The next item, there is an expenditure ledger in your packet, the usual. This reflects, I'm going to get on to a financial report as part of my report, so just hang on to the expenditure ledger. All right, we're on 3 reports, chair. I have an item here, follow up from the items at the last meeting. I find this helpful for myself, and hopefully it will be helpful for you as well. The first item is the guidance on the performance reviews and open meeting. I'm just reporting that I did send out the guidance that I had drafted that was approved by the board to be sent out. I did not receive any questions on it. We hope it was helpful. 2, board comments on hiring letter. Ms. Hale reports that as of the last meeting, she has not received any comments from the board on her hiring letter. If you have any, please send them. If she doesn't hear from you soon, she will assume the template she is using is fine and she will march forward with it into FY22. Next item, vacation schedules. This is my second call out. Please send me offline your vacation schedule. Might as well include the remainder of the year and of the calendar year 2021, and this will be for scheduling purposes. Lastly, you have in the packet, sorry, it's not lastly under this item, in the packet at pages 6 to 7, couple of policies. You saw these, we discussed them at the last meeting. I tweaked them, I put them in final. I did not send them out. I did not want to cause confusion in the waning days of having everyone get in their performance evaluations. And the board did not actually put an effective date on these. So I didn't know if we wanted these effective for this period or effective for July 1st. These are the policies, again, in your packet at 6 and 7. These are things we've discussed informally with department heads. So for example, on page 6, Mr. Hegarty knows we are not expecting reviews for election workers and wardens. And Mr. Donovan knows that we're not expecting reviews for library pages. So I don't think there's an issue making this one effective next year. On new hires, this may come into play when we look at the performance evaluations a little later on. This policy is when we will have reviews for new hires. They have to be in the town employed for 3 months. Do you want this effective today for this discussion? Because I think we do have, well, we have somebody who arguably is a new employee, but they were promoted and they were an old employee. So I don't know. I think it's maybe just easier to make these policies applicable the first of the fiscal year. Since we've discussed them, but not everybody comes to these meetings. Maybe folks didn't see them. So I guess my recommendation is I'll send them out and tell folks they're effective July 1st. Does that work for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Second item on my report, town meeting. I presented the bylaw. I hope you were there. It was pretty sunny. I can't say for sure who was there and who wasn't. I didn't take attendance. Maybe Mr. Hegarty took attendance. Our budget in the bylaw passed. I think with the budget, there were no questions, and I think the bylaw was unanimous. I didn't see any hands, but again, it was sunny. So good work, everybody. Thanks very much. Third item in my report is a financial report. As I said, you have an expenditure ledger in the packet. It reflects a payment of an invoice that was authorized by me since the last meeting. As you know, Mr. Hegarty has been assisting us with our handouts for town meeting 4 years running, and I didn't stop to think this. he's been picking up the tab for the last 3 years. So this year, with the authorization that you have previously given me, I told Jim we would take care of our own handouts for this year. There is an additional invoice that I have authorized that is not reflected in this current expenditure ledger. And that was a bill from Attorney Norris's office for the legal opinion on Section 11 benefits. And I authorized payment of that. And you may recall, we have one more item that will be coming from Mr. Norris, and we will be paying him out of consulting for the MIPA review. And in the packet, you have it, pages 8 to 11. Pages 8, 9 are documents that I received from the clerk's office, I think last week. They explain the year-end encumbrance process. Sorry, the town accountant's office. And then pages 10 and 11, a previous authorization that you have given to me and alternatively to Ms. Jasinski as clerk. So yesterday it landed in my inbox, a further communication from the town accountant's office. They need us to update this authorization. So rather than try to cram one more thing in, we're going to meet again in 2 weeks to clean up the rest of the cleanup meeting on the reviews. And I will put that documentation in front of you, and I will ask this board basically to reauthorize the authorization on page 10, and it will be updated for the town accountant. And if there's any questions on the finances, if everybody's okay, maybe we'll hold those till June 23rd and we can wrap everything up. And if you have any questions about all these invoices, we can talk about them then. Unless somebody's got something
Betsy,
pressing.
do you
on
have
them.
the amounts for those invoices?
Yeah, so when I originally got the bill from Tim Norris, it included some SAP warrant review, and Mark took that out. And the final number I want to say was 1870 and change maybe.
Okay,
So 1,870
okay.
for the benefits review. And this is not something I think that we've done before. When I joined the board, we had a consultant, GovHR, and we paid them. And this is something we're now trying to do more of the internal data collection in-house with Vanessa and Mark and Brian and Kristen. And then we've sent some work on to Mr. Norris. And I think it's appropriate. We've discussed it's appropriate. He is acting as a consultant for us. And the money's in the budget, so.
Okay, and you said there's another invoice coming, but we don't know what that amount is.
No, so this
Okay.
is on the MIPA review, the salary study. This is part of our quadrennial review. So you can see from the expenditure ledger what we have left in our budget. And I have no idea because we haven't gotten that review from him. Any other questions? And again, we can take up year-end encumbrance and budget authorization again on the 23rd. So I think that's all for my report, and I will turn the floor over to Mr. Purple. There is nothing in the packet, but I understand from Ms. Hale, he may have some remarks for us under 3B. Mr. Purple.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have one, let me get to the item, I guess, that's listed on there first, and then we can talk about, I just wanted to address the issue about meeting in person. So let me do this first, then we'll do the meeting in person part. I just wanted to let the board know, obviously, as you mentioned, the personnel board budget passed, the rest of the budget passed. I don't want to say without any changes because there were some amendments, but they were planned amendments. And I thought that everything else went well. As part of the budget, there was a creation of or funding for a new position in IT. I know that Jason Montijo, the IT manager, has been working with Ms. Hale to try to craft the job description as to what that position would look like. I think that there have been conversations, I believe, with Ms. Hale and the chair, Ms. Rosenblum, as to there really is no classification for this position yet. There really is nowhere that it can be fit into, without kind of corrupting another position. Do you make it a business administrator and then do an addendum? So I think the plan at this point is simply to make it, a contract for fiscal year 22, to work on the description, work with Personnel Board over the course of the next year to put together the job description, present it, work with Personnel Board, and then Personnel Board would have to classify the position and put it into Schedule A, where you deem appropriate. And so that is where we are at this point. I know that, Mr. Montijo has found his desk. He's gotten his feet on the ground a little bit, but he's still been pretty busy with everything. But that is in process in the background. I think Personnel Board will probably be seeing something, in the next couple of months on that. I don't know if you have
Thank
any
you,
questions.
Mr. Purple. Referring to the minutes, draft minutes that are in the packet on the first page, starting at line 50, you had reported to us on this, asked us if we would be willing to entertain something for a fall meeting. So has something changed since May, or are you just reiterating that this is the path you want to take?
I think this is the path that we should take, Madam Chair, simply because people have agreed to a town meeting, but we have not set a town meeting for the fall. And I would hate for us to plan to hire somebody on a short-term contract and then have them become an employee after an intended town meeting date, and the town meeting for some reason doesn't happen. So I think it's safer to do it as a contract employee for the calendar year, or for the fiscal year, and then take our time, make sure we do this correctly, not put the Personnel Board under any pressure to do this quickly, and do it in the normal course of your business over the year.
All right, thank you for that. And
Betsy, can I ask a
Yes.
question?
yes, Barry.
So if you're doing a contract, can you provide benefits to that individual under the terms of your benefit plans? They're not an employee?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to defer to Mr. Ballantyne, who is shaking his head yes. So
Yes.
so
Couldn't find my mute, sorry.
yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
The second item is I'm actually trying. I've had problems with my email for the past several days, but I'm finalizing an email. I may hit send during the meeting on in-person meetings, and there's been a lot of information going back and forth. And there was concern, at least on my part, is with the governor indicating that the emergency declaration expires on January 15th, which ends the ability for cities and towns to use virtual meetings and Zoom and other platforms. You have to go back to in-person meetings. I did have Ms. Hale confirm the governor's order. The expiration of the declaration is at 12:01 a.m. on June 15th. Therefore, any meetings held after June 14th have to be in person. I know that the legislature is taking a look at doing something to try to fix this, at least in the short term. The Senate is taking up a bill right now, I think, at the governor's request, to extend the use of Zoom for virtual meetings until September, and then think about whether they want to do something longer term and put something more permanent on the books, and in what instances they would allow virtual meetings to be considered, to be counted for public meetings. But you've been in Massachusetts, a long time too, and that nothing happens quickly. And so the Senate taking it up, it means the House then has to take it up, which means they're not going to agree, and then a conference committee, and then voting separately again, and the governor. This isn't going to happen before the 15th. There's going to be a gap. And so the guidance is simply going to be, if you are meeting after June 14th, your meetings are now in person. The other caveat to this, and the one good thing that's happened, is that all these meetings that never were taped before are now taped. And everyone's like, so now we're just all of a sudden shutting off the tape after 15 months. and Sam, the cable studio right now, they're not able to tape meetings. They've got some issues with their equipment that they're trying to resolve. So even those boards and committees, such as Selectmen, Advisory, on occasion, Planning Board, ZBA, Conservation to some extent, that were taped before aren't going to be taped right now. And it just kind of sets us back a little bit. But there's not a whole lot we can do. We're going to have a gap. I'm hoping it's a short gap, and I'm hoping that there'll be additional guidance coming out that says that we can return to virtual meetings as an option, at least, into the month or through the month of September. But I'll have more information, coming up. But I wanted to make sure, because Jay Montijo reached out to me today and said, I've got people requesting Zoom meeting postings into July. So I wanted to make sure that information goes out so people are aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Purple. I presume that this was in lieu of Ms. Hale's report on the same topic that's on the agenda.
I think she was okay with me jumping
That's-
over on that. There'll be other opportunities for her to speak.
No, just in terms of notice to the public of what we're going to discuss, I want
Yes.
everybody to know that I consider this topic was on the agenda just under Ms. Hale and the
Okay.
report essentially coming from the two of you. So thank you
Sure.
for that. If
Thank
I
you.
understand, until further notice, our next meeting, which is June 23rd, will be an in-person meeting. We will not be recording the meeting. People will show up as they did pre-COVID. If you have a laptop and you want to use it, you can use it. If you're a paper person, as I am, and anyone who wants to come to the meeting will show up the old-fashioned way. Correct? Am I wrong on any of that? Then the
think-
question
I
for my
think-
board, and I guess this is a question for Mr. Dietz, are we looking at changing the time of the meeting, or are we rolling into noontime? Moving to noontime was something this board did because it was easier. So could I hear from my members who are present if this is a problem for you to meet on, let's start with June 23rd in person at noontime?
Not for me.
No
Ms.
problem.
All right, a majority of the board will be there at noontime on June 23rd. Ms. Hale, from an administrative point of view, can you get us the room?
Yes.
Oh, I
take care
haven't
of
said that, book the room to you in 15 months, so it sounds kind of nice, and thank you. And then maybe we can talk to the rest of the board on June 23rd about whether they want to change the time of the July meeting. So thank you for the report, we appreciate it, and we'll just be back to the pre-COVID standard, except we'll be at noontime. Thanks, everybody. And Vanessa, your boss, having usurped your time, you don't have any new hires, and do you have anything you'd like to add on meetings for us?
Nope, I will have a report on new hires for your June 23rd meeting.
Terrific. Thank you, Vanessa. We've kept Vanessa very busy. All right. If there's nothing else under reports, I think we're ready for our joint meeting with advisory. Ms. Hale, would you be able to bring those folks in? Welcome, Ms. Cook. Welcome, Mr. Malinowski. I can't see you, but I see your names. Oh, hi, Jason. Hi, Kathy.
Hello.
There.
Thank you for being here. Sorry to keep you waiting. We try to get through it as quickly as we can. And we're awaiting Mr. Nixon, who will be joining us after a time. All right, so on page 12 to 16 of your packet, you've seen this before. This is the legal opinion from Mr. Norris, Special Town Legal Counsel.
Betsy,
Attorney.
can I interrupt for just a moment?
Yes, Ms. Cook.
So we do not have a quorum with advisory, so I do not need to call advisory to order. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. I appreciate that. So you're just fellow citizens on a committee representing yourselves and your committee. So
Sounds good.
nothing else. Okay. So, and I provided this legal opinion to Ms. Cook and Mr. Malinowski, so hopefully they had a chance to take a look at it. I'm going to do what Mr. Healy does. I think the expression is set the table just a little bit for the discussion. So we're all on the same page, and then I'll open it up for discussion. I don't want to direct anybody in a particular direction. It's just that this board previously discussed this at the last meeting, and I would like to follow up on some additional information. So the first item was some external info. Ms. Hale was going to collect for us from her listserv. And the request from the board was to send out a request via listserv with no demographic limitation whatsoever on how other municipalities define part-time and full-time, which is the first prong of what we asked Attorney Norris to look at. So Ms. Hale, and then subsequent to that, I sat down with Vanessa because I wanted to get some additional information. So Vanessa, I don't think we have your listserv request in the packet. So I'm going to give you the floor to explain what you've done and what you've learned and where you're at on our externals. Thank you.
Sure. I'm still collecting responses from the municipalities. I have about 30 responses so far. We haven't put them into a chart yet. They're kind of, the information, the way it was received is a little bit all over the place. Some people just provide a copy to their document. Some people, summarize in the text of the email. So it's come in a variety of forms. So it hasn't been assimilated into a chart yet. But most of the information is, not that dissimilar to, what Southborough is doing with paid leave and how we treat full-time and part-time employees. There are a couple of outliers so far that have very extremely generous benefits. So we're working on putting all that information in a chart for the board.
Okay, if I could just interject, Vanessa, if you could actually read to the board, because they only heard one part, the part where they asked for definition of full-time, part-time. They were not party to when you and I met and you did the second. So if you could just tell the board in your own words or read from your listserv exactly the questions that you posed, that you are now getting information.
Hang on, sure. Let me just grab one of those to read to you.
Just so everybody's on the same page about what you're asked, what you have asked other municipalities to report. And the limitations that you set on the second prong of the search.
Sure. So in addition to the, how people classify a part-time or full-time employee, the other questions we posed were what is your vacation accrual schedule for your employees? What is your accrual schedule for sick time? In addition, we asked, do union employees have the same benefits for vacation and sick time accrual, or how do they differ? And lastly, do you allow employees to carry over vacation time? And if so, what is the process for that? And does it have an expiration date?
Thank you. Sounds very comprehensive. I appreciate it. So basically, are you getting back a bunch of policies that will then need to be read and summarized by us? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, now that we're all in person, I guess my first step is to have a meeting with Vanessa and start going through them. And I'd be happy if anybody else would like to join me in reviewing those policies. Ms. Jasinski will put you on the list. Thank you. So offline, we'll set up a meeting, Vanessa, Dorian, and myself, to start collecting and sorting them. Anybody who wants to join is welcome to join. And not having seen any of these materials yet, I can't guarantee you. I won't have a summary for June 23rd, hopefully for July 14th. But I'll keep you posted. Thank you, Ms. Hale. The second source for supplemental information is in your packet. In addition to having Ms. Hale do her listserv, I sent a request for additional information via Mr. Purple to the law firm. And they got back a response via email, and it was sent to me. It's in your packet at 1718. I just cut and pasted the email into a memo, and you can see what my question was and the information that came. So that's follow-up from the Norris law firm. And that will be part of our discussion. Third, we were looking at the union contracts. Not everybody had them. Ms. Hale sent them to everybody. Thank you. Just a note, I did not put them in the packet. They are very lengthy and I didn't want to burden the packet. If anyone is watching us, they are public documents. Ms. Hale can send them to you. She's one of our access officers. Mr. Purple can send them to you. The town clerk can probably send them to you. And they are public documents and we will be referring to them at this meeting. So the third prong here was, how is vacation leave handled with the unions? It's set forth in section 11B3 of the SAP. Similar language appears in 3 out of 4 union contracts. The fire department has its own little different language. The question is, these contracts don't speak to expiry. The SAP doesn't speak to expiry. So I know from my experience, and we all know, there's the written word and then there's how things are put into practice. So we asked Mr. Purple to spend some time with the union contracts and come back and tell us how it's done at the unions, in the unions. And I would know, I don't know if everybody has access to the union contracts. Before I give Mark the floor, I just want to know what the 4 contracts are and where you can find these provisions. All right, the first union contract, we call them CBAs, collective bargaining agreements, that I'm looking, they're in no particular order. Southborough Communications Officers, you will find Article 9, page 10, deals with vacation. They have virtually the same language. They substitute police chief approval for department head approval, and they use the word present fiscal year instead of current fiscal year. DPW collective bargaining agreement deals with the subject of vacations at Article 14, page 13, continuing on to page 14. We have Permanent Firefighters Union. They deal with vacation time in Article 11, starting on page 21. And last but not least, we have the Police Bargaining Agreement. They deal with vacation time in Article 10, starting at page 20. So I would just give the floor over to Mr. Purple to tell us about practices with vacation time in the unions. Thank you, Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, I think you, as you alluded to, Mr. Healy, set the table well for that one. I will note that when it comes to vacation leave, the contracts, for the most part, mimic, with vacation time at least, mimic closely to what the SAP does. As you noted, fire, they have a 48-hour work week, and you will see that there in the collective bargaining agreement for fire, they don't talk about days, they talk about tours based on their shifts. So it's essentially 2 tours a week, and they tend to follow similarly to some of the other contracts, with the exception that after 20 years, they have 12 tours of leave, which would be 6 weeks of vacation, 288 hours. But that is applicable only to firefighters in the town who have been employed prior to July 1, 2004. And so that is a limitation there as well. With DPW, they have a similar accrual that they follow the accrual that the SAP does for the 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But any employee hired before July 1, 2003 is allowed to accrue 20 hours of vacation leave per month. And so they have that condition as well. So like I said, for vacation time, it's pretty consistent with those caveats.
So the vacation time, so it doesn't use the word expiry in the SAP, but it says you can carry over 1 year into the second year. So by implication, you can't continue to carry. Is that the same? Is that how it works in the unions as well?
Yeah, there is no language that specifies carrying a vacation time in the contracts.
There's no language in the CBAs that says you can carry over?
No.
I thought they do.
What's that?
They do say carryover. They don't say expiry. Let's take communication. It has the same, I'm on page 10, Article 9. An employee shall be permitted to carry over up to 1 year's earned vacation.
Okay,
So where is there no carryover? It's the same
Oh.
language as the SAP with the changes that I noted. Police
well,
chief
yeah,
instead of,
communications and police are similar, so they would have the same.
so they do have, so we
Yeah.
all, we know,
So I misspoke. You're
Okay.
correct.
so they have the carryover language, and the question is, do they have additional language that talks about expiration? And is it the same carryover? We can only carry over 1 year into the next, and then, so the question is, how does it work?
I don't recall there's any language in there in terms of expiration.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at, and maybe I'm not, there's the language, and then it's how it works out in practice, because language is, as Barry knows, it's man's best attempt after 3 years of law school and more to put into black and white what's going to happen. And then there's what actually happens. So,
I think for that, so I'll be honest with you. I'm not prepared for that portion of the discussion as in terms of the practice piece. I would need to spend probably a little more time with the individual department heads, with Chief Paulus, Chief Achilles, and Superintendent Galligan to get an understanding of how things work. I mean, if things are being done outside of how they're supposed to be done in the contract, that's usually an issue. That's why you have contracts to set the rules. I understand what you're saying, but that's how it should work.
I'm not saying that anyone's breaking any rules. I'm saying that because language isn't perfect, there's oftentimes an interpretation. Let's take the SAP, for example, with sick leave. We have a full provision on sick leave. At our last meeting, a question came up about how does FMLA, family medical leave, dovetail with sick leave? And Vanessa said, I don't really know. We have family medical leave. Sometimes we use it, sometimes we don't. I'm going to look into that. We do sick leave on a case-by-case basis. So my question is, I can read what's in the union contract. I can see that the language is the same. But oftentimes what I hear when I speak with the administrators is, we take this language as a springboard and then we have a conversation about how to handle something. That's what I heard with respect to sick leave. So is that what happens at the union level? My board has no knowledge.
I haven't had that conversation, Betsy, that we use the language as a springboard to.
Okay,
do
I'm not
something
communicating well. I hear from you guys with respect to sick leave, and let's just talk about the SAP, that the SAP says what it says. It seems pretty clear. But then when somebody has sick leave, you use the words case by case basis. Sometimes we talk to Tim Norris. Nobody could really spell out for the board exactly how FMLA dovetails with sick leave. So, and research needs to be done case by case basis. I'm just asking if the same thing happens at the union level.
I'm going to say no, without I'm not aware that it operates differently than how it's prescribed in the CBAs.
Thank you for your report. Thank you. Okay, and if anybody has follow-up questions, they can ask them. All right, and I think that was everything I had on my list for, and then just leading into sick leave FMLA. There is a policy in the packet at 19, 20, 21, and a poster at 22. When we were talking about benefits at our last meeting, the issue came up, I believe Mr. Rubenstein asked, this is in the minutes, documentation is not required in the SAP until someone returns, from medical leave. And that led into a discussion of if it was a FMLA leave, there is documentation required. That led to questions about the board wanting to understand the interaction of FMLA and town sick leave. And Ms. Hale was going to prepare a report and give us some materials. So I will give her the floor. Thanks, Vanessa.
Sure, thank you. So in the board's packet, as the chair noted, is the town's FMLA policy, along with just a quick overview in a poster from the Federal Department of Labor that's provided to all municipalities across the country. So we have actually asked our labor attorney for a template policy for FMLA from Attorney Norris, because you might note that the policy, the town policy that's in the packet was last reviewed in 2002. So it's quite old. So it certainly is due to be updated. There's one or two things missing that should be in that policy that relate to military leave that are allowable reasons to take FMLA leave. So we're in the process of getting an updated policy recommended from our attorney, our labor attorney for that. You'll also see on the question of sick time, you'll also see in the town's policy that it does allow employees to use sick leave if they are out on family medical leave, FMLA time, I should say. So that is the process right now. As far as documentation, when someone does take FMLA leave, we use the federal Department of Labor forms that the employee's doctor signs and returns to us with the appropriate documentation. So that is how we're governing when someone is eligible to use FMLA leave.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. As a threshold matter, so we have a family medical leave policy in the packet, 1920, pages 19 and 20. Who does this purport to apply to?
To all employees that are eligible to take FMLA leave. You have to have worked a certain number of hours to qualify for it. So it would not apply to part-time employees.
So is this policy referenced in the collective bargaining agreements, do you know? And incorporated in them?
I do not believe they are incorporated into our union contracts.
So can by negotiation, can the unions have a different policy?
I don't believe they can, since it's a federal law.
Okay. So is there something I would think the union contracts would refer to, let's just take a look. Sick leave, Article 11, I'm in communications. That's the first one in my binder. Sick leave, page 11 for communications. I don't see anything about, is there some overarching language about statutes on benefits in our CBAs, Mark? Is that part of because I don't see it in the sick leave part.
I don't believe, I'm not aware. I'm looking quickly, Betsy, but I don't see
Yeah.
anything.
So when you
that
sit down to negotiate a union contract, if you've got a federal law that says employees have X rights, employer has X rights, do those need to be incorporated in your union agreement?
I think usually those are addressed in a broad sense under management rights, but not specifically. Barry's got his hand up.
If you look
Mr.
at,
Rubenstein.
if you look at Article 16, it deals with the FMLA and other similar state and federal leave laws.
Oh, thank you. So if you're in the communications bargaining agreement, yes, Article 16, statutory leaves, page 13. And that, thank you, Mr. Rubenstein, very helpful. All right, so you would need to make sure that any policy that issues from the Board of Selectmen matches what's in your collective bargaining agreement, correct?
Yeah, if there is anything that is different then, but if we're all referring from the same law, from the
Yeah,
same federal law, then it would be applicable. Again, it's not something that you don't want to keep tweaking the collective bargaining agreements every year, because I think, as Barry would indicate, language is expensive. And
they are what
so,
they are. The agreements are done every 3 years and they say what they say. The town policy hasn't been updated since 2002. So presumably the attorneys and the parties who are updating the CBAs are hopefully taking a look at these laws. Anyway, that's beyond our purview. With respect to the SAP employees, do you know when the BOS passes these policies, do they speak to the personnel board? Because under 11C5 of the SAP, sick leave policies and practices shall be prepared and established under the direction of the personnel board. So with respect to SAP employees, seems like we have a jurisdictional issue. I'm happy to work with the Board of Selectmen But if you're gonna revise this policy with guidance from Town Labor Council, I think Personnel Board is the appropriate board to do it.
I think it would be, I think the pathway, unless Ms. Hale shakes her head otherwise, I think the pathway would be for a new draft to come from council, to have the input of Personnel Board, and then brought to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration after you've had your input, if that makes sense to you.
That makes sense to me. All right, that's all the questions and items I noted as chair that were hanging from the last meeting. Everybody should hopefully be on the same page. And I will now open it up to questions, and I don't favor one board over the other. Whoever wants to speak is welcome to speak.
So can I set the set the table for advisory and then let Jason take over? Because Jason has been the lead from advisory as far as the issue of what the proper accrual is for sick and vacation time, which is where this all got started.
Certainly. You have the floor, Ms. Cook.
So advisory's interest in this is that we are concerned about the ability for a town employee to accrue excessive vacation time and excessive, and is in the eye of the beholder, and excessive sick time. We feel as a committee that vacation time is to encourage people to take vacations instead of carrying over a lot of vacation to basically get paid out when you retire. We feel the same thing about the sick time. It's to allow people to be sick and not feel like they've got to crawl to work to avoid losing pay, and or everything you do when you call it sick, go to the doctors, whatever. So that was kind of our big picture concern, is that because in the past few years, there's been a couple of pretty significant payouts when people, long-term employees, have retired, that we really thought this should be looked at. Then in addition, once Jason started looking at it, he found that there seemed to be a discrepancy between the accounting for it, that it wasn't necessarily being accounted for correctly by those that were in charge of trying to keep track of this. So we were concerned about the accounting system that tracks accrued vacation and accrued sick time. I mean, a lot of times you get a paycheck, right? A paycheck stub that in some cases is going to show you exactly what you've got accrued, et cetera. So we wanted to make sure that those accruals were also being handled correctly, because as Betsy says, it's great to have it written down, but what did we really do in practice? So I believe the second part may be more or less straightened out, but Jason can confirm that. But the first part is where we're still concerned about is what is the right policy for the town to have to properly reward employees, but not necessarily provide a large benefit for when someone leaves. So we've got, as always, advisory has the fiscal health of the town in mind, which is where this is coming from. So with that kind of introduction, let me turn this over to Jason, but I do want to clarify one thing too before I get there. When we talk about accrual, in the world that Jason and I come from, the accounting tax world, we're talking about the end of the year, what the town has to accrue on its balance sheet as its liability that is vested. That is at 6/30/21, if we stop business that day, what would we owe employees as far as accrued sick time and accrued vacation? So that's the number that we want to make sure is right as far as financials go. And again, I think Jason's going to say we've made progress in trying to get that right. So the focus really is on encouraging you guys to look at this and possibly revise a policy that hopefully will include all employees, not just the 4 unions and the town, but also schools. Which looks like you haven't looked at that contract or those contracts. So with that, Jason, why don't you pick it up and.
Yeah, so let me start with the accounting aspects of it first. I think, through the review that was done last fall, everything seems to be in order. It mainly related to one of the unions. So I think it's even outside of kind of personnel that are under the SAP and obviously subject to the purview of the personnel board. So at least based on what I've done, I feel very comfortable that there's progress there. But I think what it did open my eyes to, which I think, Betsy, you sort of alluded to in your opening, is it's a bear to maintain. Even if everyone agrees on the interpretation of the language, everyone has different anniversary dates. And, is there a way to streamline it? Because I don't know how long it takes to maintain it. But now with that one union now coming under Brian's team, and the support there, I think there's just, hopefully some synergies that can be realized, but also with an eye towards accuracy. I would say where the conversations in advisory have continued to go since the release of the opinion, Betsy, that you circulated and is in your packet, is really around what Kathy mentioned. It's around what should be the maximum accrual that someone should be allowed to carry. And I think that was the last point that Vanessa had highlighted when she articulated what she sent out to the listserv. I think all the other questions are really important and may inform that final question, but it's really, if an employee gets 4 weeks of vacation a year, should they be allowed to carry any of that to a future fiscal year? Should they be allowed to carry some of it, or should they be allowed to carry all of it? And I think I'll bring you back to kind of at least my interpretation. I'm an accountant, not an attorney, but the current SAP really does allow, depending upon the anniversary date in someone's date of potentially severing an employment relationship with the town, does allow someone at any one time during a year to have up to 2 years worth of vacation on the books eligible for payout at the time someone severs their employment with the town. So that's really where my focus has been, as the one that's kind of dove into it, is that appropriate? At least based on Attorney Norris's research that he did, that I didn't see that number anywhere other than maybe one community. Some seem to be no carrier, some seem to be 5 days. But also looking at, I studied the department head contracts that we have in town. Most of those are 5 days or less. And the unions, I think you went through that and probably requires a little more analysis, but each of those unions, I would say, have different provisions of what they can accrue. But if I had one suggestion, it would be for your board that are experts in this area to determine what is the appropriate amount that at any one time someone should be allowed to have on the books. And would also strongly look at, like you've done with performance evaluations, look at a way to get everyone on the same date. So fiscal year is usually the easiest thing to use, but find a way to get everyone corrected so that every fiscal year someone starts with a balance, they accrue throughout the year, and they can carry X balance to the next year. That allows get some of the lumpiness out of the system. So that's where we're at, but obviously we don't have the expertise to tell you what's appropriate or not. And there's obviously legal, decisions that need to be made in terms of how you would affect any change if you decided to go that route. But we do think from a financial perspective, we do have some very large liabilities on the books and question, should they have ever been allowed to get this? Yes, by the SAP, yes, they have been allowed to, but should this policy have been looked at sooner? So that's where we're at.
Thank you both. I'll open it up to questions, Personnel Board, for either of our guests. And I don't know, Vanessa, do we have anybody in the audience?
Yes, Mr. Sabelli has his hand raised.
All right. Not seeing any board members' hands raised. Happy to take a question from Mr. Sabelli.
Can you hear me, Betsy?
I can. You have the floor, Mr. Sabelli.
Yeah, just to give you some history on this, I understand that, people are looking at this concerned. And I think it's certainly from a budgeting standpoint, it's definitely something you got to look at. But just to give you the history, I've been here 21 years. Vanessa's right on my tail. I can tell you, as far as just speaking with vacation, it's always been able to roll all the way. If you get 4 weeks, you can roll it. And there's never been an expiration date in my 21 years. Vanessa, do you remember anything ever being? Brian administers that, and I think Brian can tell you in his 17 years, and he also deals with all the unions, it's always been understood that you can roll over. Is that correct?
Roll over how long, Paul? 1 year?
Yes. Yep. So at your anniversary date, if you had 4 weeks, you can carry 4. If you have 5, well, you just lost a week. Jason does make a good point that if you didn't take it, you could literally all the way up to your anniversary is literally accumulate. If somebody left right before their anniversary, you could accumulate almost two years worth, or in that example, 8 weeks. So he is correct on that. You could definitely do that. And I've seen people kind of do that over the years when they have a planned retirement. They may not take, take time that year and do that. So that's definitely a concern. But I just want to make you aware that that is in fact how it has been in the 21 years I've been here. It is also and Vanessa can maybe verify this, when we recruit people, they're told how that works. They're told about vacation. They're told about how much sick time they get. It's part of the package you're offering people. So, if moving forward, we're going to change it, I think you do it exactly how we eliminated the 6 weeks and you make it for the newer people. I don't think it's right to recruit people, have them work 5, 10, 20 years, and all of a sudden, well, we're going to eliminate sick time and you can't carry or whatever. I'm not sure that, it's something that's got to be thought through.
Can I just interject for a minute, Mr. Sabelli?
Sure.
There is a legal opinion on point in our packet with regard to whether or not you can change this. The first question the board asked, I don't know if you've had a chance to follow our discussions. We've discussed this at a couple of meetings now. It's all in our minutes. That's why I do comprehensive minutes. So you'll feel like you heard the discussion. The discussion started back in December with Mr. Malinowski, and the legal opinion that is in our packet speaks to you cannot take away, just to be clear, any accrued benefits for a long-term employee such as yourself. You have vacation or sick in the bank, we cannot claw it back. What Mr. Norris has opined is permissible is that for a new class of employees who may be hired, you can change their benefit. And there are examples of that in your SAP, Paul. If you look at section 11, for employees hired after X date, we're going to do this. Mr. Purple spoke to that in the union context. That is something that is routinely done. Benefits change and they affect a new class of employees. And the third class of employees benefits that we're looking at is long-term employees, not what they've banked, but what they may earn moving forward. And it is our interpretation of Mr. Norris's legal opinion that is in the packet, that with respect to a longstanding employee such as yourself, we can, with appropriate notice, change a policy for you moving forward. To be clear, can't claw back, can't take what you have accrued, but we can say effective July 1st, 2022 for all employees moving forward. So the prospective benefits you may earn, we could put a different cap on it.
So you can add a cat, yes.
Yes,
just
we
worried
can
about-
cap moving forward, but it sounded, and maybe I misunderstood, like you thought we could go and take away something that's been yours for 20 years. We're not going to take
Yeah.
away anything that's been banked, but we could talk about capping moving forward.
Understood.
And to say that we've done it this way for 20 years, so that's how we're going to continue to do it, I think is the number one most destructive thing that I hear. Not number one. There are plenty of destructive things. It's not a guiding principle for me. We've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it. It's a legitimate concern. Liabilities that did not exist 20 years ago when Mr. Malinowski was in first grade are now pressing on the town. Ms. Cook was in second grade. So things change. And we do need to look at them. So I'm not going to foreclose a discussion because we've always done it this way. You raised many other points. It's part of the package. Mr. Malinowski raised the point, Ms. Cook as well. What is the appropriate benefit? What should it be? And I would say, what is the appropriate benefit in the context of the town? What are we doing for our, we're part of a picture and everybody on the board knows it now. Because we talk about it all the time. We're a piece of a bigger picture.
Betsy, I'm not
unions-
suggesting, you can't cap it or we shouldn't change. I'm just giving you the history, how it's been handled and, the vacation and the role. But that's all we definitely have to address it in some sort of way because, there is a big liability that's piling up. And, when I was one of the first department heads to, the old guard left, we had a problem with that. We did not have articles in place to, to pay people out. And that was a situation where the assessor's budget literally got wiped out because Arthur retired and took about a third of the budget with him to pay out. So certainly I understand. I just want to, give you the history that this is kind of how it's always been, not suggesting that we should continue. But we definitely need to, I was just more worried about, I did not see that memo, Betsy.
Well, Paul, the reason to do this is not because it's hard to estimate what the payout's going to be for the budget, although Brian tries. I mean, there is an article now, but it's still a guessing game as far as what should go in it, because you don't know for sure who's going to retire. But it is what it is. That's still going to be there as far as the owed stuff goes. But, in the end, whatever policy that the personnel board decides is they should recommend, I would think you'd want to bring in your department heads to encourage them to, make sure that they encourage their employees to take their vacation and to not be hesitant to use their sick time when appropriate. That, this philosophy to bank sick time, I really think is wrong-headed.
And Mr. Spelly, we always put, endeavor always to put everything we're going to discuss in the packet. The legal opinion starts at page 12. So I encourage you to read it. I thank you for your comments. It's necessary history. None of us goes back that far. So thank you. And I didn't mean to suggest that we don't want to hear the history. It's just, we're going to entertain a discussion about change, regardless of the history, I guess. Do I see a hand up from Mr. Rubenstein?
Yeah, I guess I'm of a few minds on this. On the one hand, I would be opposed to not allowing any accumulation, because there are circumstances that come up where someone, because of work pressures, simply is not able to take, they might have planned a week's vacation in December and an emergency arises, they can't take it. And I don't think we want people to be losing. That's not an argument that we should allow them to carry over all of the vacation. I think it's the employer's interest and the employee's interest that employees take vacation. But there's also, to me, when you think about it, being a former lawyer, not an accountant, I understand the liability carryover issue, but at the end of the day, we're paying people for not working. So whether they don't work for 4 weeks in a year, or they work for 2 of those weeks, but then they don't work for 2 weeks at the end of their careers, the total is not different. Obviously, over time, we're paying out more because compensation goes out, but we're not paying them for not working more weeks than they're entitled to when they retire. But having said that, again, I'm sympathetic. I certainly don't see any reason why we should be more generous than other towns are, which, from the limited data we have, suggests we may be. So I'm open to curtailing it, but again, I'd be opposed to curtailing it to 0.
Mr. Rosenblum, can I just add something to that?
Certainly, Mr. Malinowski.
So Barry, I completely understand that. I think to Mr. Sabelli's point, I don't think advisory was challenging the accrual rate either. Obviously that falls within your purview every year to look at, but some of these balances have been on the books for a long time. So to use a simple example, maybe the person was earning $1 an hour when they accrued that balance. That number is now $10, $15 an hour, because naturally the employee has gotten raises, sometimes even promotions during the time. So, these are liabilities that were generated, candidly, should have been paid for by prior taxpayers. And ultimately, when some employees retire now, it's borne by current taxpayers. And, I think Ms. Cook alluded to it. There's been some $30,000, $40,000 payouts here in the last couple of years with some of the long-term employees. I I guess the way we always approached it was, is that the right answer in public service? It's certainly not what we see in private sector, but I'm very open to the idea that public and private sectors don't always abide by the same principles and policies, et cetera. So just wanted to point that out, that I think you're dealing with stuff that was accrued at a much lower rate. And then I think the other thing I would just encourage you to look at is, on top of the financial piece, is the wellness of the employee, right? There's a reason you get vacation, right? There's a reason why a longer tenured employee gets 4 or 5 weeks of vacation, is because they naturally probably have a lot more job responsibilities and need that break to actually bring their all to the office. So if that person is really working 51 out of 52 weeks of the year and not taking what the town has given them as a benefit, you really start to question also, are we getting our all from the employee? And I think that's an impossible item to actually quantify, but it is just something I would ask you to consider.
I have a
Thank
question.
you. Ms. Jasinski, yes.
Is there a way to, and I don't understand I don't know the accounting part of this. If you accrue vacation, can we freeze the rate of that accrual to what it was when you were getting paid? So if you're getting $25 an hour and you don't use your vacation that year and you accrue it to the next year, but now you're making $27 an hour, can we freeze that accrued vacation at the previous rate? Because that's when they were supposed to use that time, instead of giving them extra money because they've not used their vacation. Why would we be doing that? Why are we not freezing that time that wasn't used at that rate and just carrying it that way and not paying them out at a higher rate? We shouldn't be paying them at a higher rate.
But think about it, Dorianne, if you work for 20 years and then you retire, right? You've got a lot of accrued sick time and you've got 2 years of accrued vacation because you timed it right. You basically are going to get paid at the rate that you earn when you leave. And there's really not anything I can think of that you could do about that. That's just how it works. You've got it accrued and you're going to get paid. So I don't think you can do that. I don't know how
Okay,
you would.
I wasn't sure. That's why I asked the question. Thanks, Kathy.
I think
Vanessa,
it's a good
when you,
question, Dorian, from a common sense point of view, which I appreciate. But according to the legal opinion we got, and again, we had a question about whether it mattered how the person was separated or not, because our SAP says something that needs to be changed. Regardless of reason for separation, you pay them, and you pay them at the rate they're earning when they separate. I don't think there's a provision in the law that you can go back and retroactive them. Barry is shaking his head. It's certainly something that was not addressed in the opinion. We could, if it's an issue for anybody, we could double check it. Oh, Mr. Nixon has joined us. Let's
Can you hear
pause
me?
for a moment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, Dave. Is that by design?
No.
All right, we'll wait a moment and see if you can get your,
Okay. How's that?
can see you. You look fabulous, Dave. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the discussion.
Thank
We were
you.
just, I don't know if you heard, talking about vacation accrual and having to pay it out at the rate that the person is making, their highest rate, which is right before they separate.
Mm.
Rather than can we somehow retro it to, year when they earned it, when they were making less, because the salaries go up 2% every year. I think Ms. Cook has answered that legally we pay them the rate that we're paying them when they retire. And I don't know, Barry, if you have information.
No, we're making it sound like the individual is getting this huge amount of money when they only should have gotten what they would have been paid 20 years ago. But everything has gone up in the 20 years. It's all relative. Taxes have gone up, cost of living has gone up. So for that employee, they're not, in some sense, getting a windfall because they were smart enough to put this vacation off for all those years. There may be some delta between what they've been getting in increases and what the actual cost of living is. I suppose they benefit from that. But otherwise, relatively speaking, the payout they're getting is pretty close to what they would have gotten 15 years ago relative to what everything costs. So again, I don't need to be arguing against you. I'm supportive of making changes that'll put the town's house in better financial order. And I'm certainly, particularly based on what we've seen of what other towns are doing, open to cutting back the accumulation. But I was just getting the impression that these employees, by holding off, are getting this huge windfall, way more than they otherwise would have gotten. When I really don't think that's the case. And on the other point, I completely agree, Jason. I think I said it, that it's in everyone's interest to encourage employees to use all of their vacation every year. And I think we should be telling people that, we should be getting that out there, that's good for everyone for them to do that. So, anyway.
You know, there's some businesses that make you take a vacation in the for-profit world. It's required, it's mandatory. And Barry, we're not trying to use the word windfall. We don't think someone is intentionally going to start one day and say, well, I'm just not going to be sick for 40 days. If I am, I'm going to go into work no matter what. We don't think that's happening, but we still think that the intention of sick time is not to stockpile a bunch of time to be paid out when you leave. You've got your pension for that when you leave. You've been taken care of as far as retirement goes with your pension, Social Security, whatever. So we just think that it is not appropriate to use something that was intended to give people a chance to miss work and not feel guilty about it and still get paid for it. And if you don't use it that way, that's great. We're glad you're not sick, but then to then say, okay, then we're going to write you a check at the end of it. That's where we're having an issue.
Okay, and I agree completely on sick leave. My comments were focused on vacation, but I think the current SAP for people hired after July 1, 2007 already says you don't get paid any sick leave when you leave. And it's only for people hired before then. And I believe they get 20%. And I'd be fine with doing away with that. I agree with you completely. There's no reason someone should be paid for sick leave that they didn't have any need to use while they're employed.
Vanessa, did you ask all 351 towns for their answer when you went out to your listserv?
Kathy, the listserv went out to the members of the Mass Municipal HR Association. So not every single community is a member, but I would say at least, 280 to 300 municipalities with our members.
And you got about 30 back?
About 30 so far. They're still coming in, but 30 so far.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to actually try to wrap this up because we do have performance evaluations that we have to get to today. And that's a big topic for us.
Can I just add a comment, Betsy?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I wasn't privy to the entire conversation, just the tail end of it, I guess. But my opinion would be that sick leave, if not used, does not become vacation time. Period.
Thank you. And we will be having a substantive discussion. It was not my intention to have performance evaluations and this benefit conversation all wrapped up at the same meeting. This was a chance for us to understand and flesh out with advisory what they're looking for and to make progress on the information we've requested. I personally don't feel like I have nearly enough information yet to make a decision. I want to see what Vanessa's listserv request yields. I want to understand a little bit better what we ask the unions to do and how that plays out. And maybe that just means I need to sit down with Mark and the chiefs of those departments and understand exactly what their provisions say. And if Mark suggests that they do exactly what's printed, great. Then I just need to understand a little bit more about what's printed. And while I have Mr. Malinowski here, Mr. Malinowski, are you having the same discussion with the unions as well?
In terms of what? Sorry.
In terms of what we've seen is 3 out of the 4 unions in town have the same carryover provision. And if we understand Mr. Purple, they adhere to what's in writing. So you're concerned that SAP employees could, depending on timing, at the end of year 2, have 2 years vacation accrued. And if they separate, that would also be allowable at least on 3 of 4 union contracts. Are you having a similar discussion with the people that write the union contracts?
I have not, but I have reviewed the union contracts and be happy when you're ready to discuss those again. I'd be happy to say they're very different contracts. It's just again, I'm an accountant. I read the words. I try to put it into numbers, right? Especially the fire one is very unique. Having experience in the fire service, there's a reason it's unique due to their shift structure. You know, they work 2 out of every 8. So
Fair enough. But you
so
were
I think
here when, just to interject, because I've got to move along, under the
Yeah.
communications one, it
Yeah.
has the same exact vacation carryover language that the SAP has.
But then it limits, there's a clause in there that says 60 hours, I believe.
Let's take a look while we're all together. Okay.
So that's what I'm saying is there's little snippets, like it reads the same and then all of a sudden there's a sentence. So communication has something a little different than police, has a little something different than fire. I've never looked at the schools, but I think you're absolutely right. Someone should look at that. And then I have not studied the DPW like I've studied the public safety ones.
It's beyond my capability, and I can speak for Dorian. The 2 of us together are not going to tackle the schools. I think it's reasonable that we're going to tackle 351 towns with respect to the unions and the SAP, or 280 towns or 35 towns. I don't know that I'm going to get to. It's important to me as chair that we look at this in the context of the individual employees who have contracts and the unions. And thank you, Jason, for that point. So I think there's work that needs to be done. I need to sit down. Dorian's volunteered to sit down with Vanessa and look at the responses. I need to schedule a meeting with Mark to sit down and look at the unions. Jason, if you want to be part of that, and then I'll bring Dorian and I can bring back some more information to the board. This will not be June 23rd. I would suggest that we table this to July 14th. I don't know if that works for you, or possibly the August meeting. If folks are going to be away for the 4th of July, this is going to be, we're in vacation season. So I don't know what's reasonable. If we should table this to August, September, it's going to take time for people to have these meetings and do their homework. And we're getting into vacation season. So I don't know. What do you
I
think?
think September. That's going to take a lot to go through, Betsy. I would say early September, maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to take a few days off that coincide right before when we're getting the packet ready for the July. We do have a meeting on July 14th, but I don't know that I'm going to get everything read. So I think that's probably a pretty realistic assessment. I will put this back on the calendar for our September meeting, and everyone will do a lot of homework between now and then. If you are on the board and you're interested in helping, please send me a message offline. I would also, to Mr. Malinowski's point about wellness, about employees not taking vacation, I don't have a clear picture in my head, and I would like to sit down with Mr. Ballantyne and understand just how big an issue this is. Do we have many employees who are not taking vacation? Do we have many employees that need to be taking vacation? I understand it's a big numbers issue, but I have no idea how many hours we're talking about, how many employees are involved, how this is working out in practice. So I'm going to need to have a meeting with Brian. Or perhaps we could ask Brian to come back and do a report for the entire board. There's a lot of pieces here and we do need to move on the agenda. So thank you, everybody. And we will table this till September, but I'm going to put this on the agenda for updates. If additional questions come up, just so if people have things they want to say about it, not for a decision, I think that'd be a good idea just to put it as a standing item on our agenda so people can bring up any questions that they have. And does anybody else feel there's anything else that they need to say about this topic before we move on at this time? All right, so thank you to Ms. Cook, Mr. Malinowski. There was another item. I really don't know what it's all about. As a courtesy, I put it on the agenda because Ms. Cook wanted to address it. So this is on our agenda. Sorry, I've lost my agenda. This would be 4B, IT department. Ms. Cook, you have the floor.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
I'll be quick. I just wanted to make sure that personnel was aware of advisory's position as far as the staffing with the MIS department. Advisory obviously does not hire. We only can recommend. But we have spent a lot of time on this subject for 2 years, not just 1 year, because of our concern about the risk the town has, like everyone does in this world, with cybersecurity and all the things going on. And it's accelerating. You can read in the paper as far as things that are happening every day with ransomware, et cetera. So back up 2 years. For the previous budget season, we encouraged Tom LaFlamme when he was here, instead of hiring a part-time person, we really wanted a second full-time person for fiscal year 21. We ended up agreeing with him because he really did not want a second full-time person. He wanted a part-time person for the first time. So we ended up agreeing with that because that's what he wanted, and out of respect for him. We wrote a very strong report with advisory's report to town meeting 2020, again, expressing our concern about the risk that this town has with the structure we have. And then Mr. LaFlamme resigned. So we were without a person to man the department for 5 months. So this town had no IT person at all for 5 months. This past budget season, we worked with the Municipal Technology Committee, who is staffed with some very knowledgeable people in this area, to basically recommend a budget that would allow a structure that would include 2 full-time people. MTC agreed with it. We thought that everyone else agreed with it, but based on what Jay said at town meeting, what I've heard said from others, I'm not sure that that message has really gotten across. So I just wanted personnel to know that advisory very much strongly supports a full-time second person that could step into Jay's shoes if something happened to Jay. We need other services besides that, so don't think we stop there. We've got a lot of other things we need that we may need to buy a la carte, but we do not believe the right answer is a person who's just there to do help desk, to do certain things, to set up Zoom meetings when we were doing that. So we do believe we need a second full-time person. Personnel can decide if this comes to what that person should be classified as. It may be, 2 of J's, I don't know, but MTC needs to weigh in on this for sure. But I just want to make sure that it sounded like the recommendation from advisory that went into building the budget for fiscal year 22 is not necessarily what is being presented to personnel board. And I don't want to say any more at this point because I really want MTC to step up and make sure that they're part of this discussion. And they are. They're working with Jay, et cetera, because it's them that we listen to. We just have quite a bit of knowledge on advisory as far as this area goes. And it's just something that is really at the top of our minds as far as protecting this town from some of the things we see other towns going through right now.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. I appreciate it. We've often remarked in this board how things get done in silos, and we don't know what other important boards who have input in this area are thinking. There is no more important board for us to hear from than our own advisory. So thank you for coming out of your silo and coming to this meeting, and for all the time you've put into this for 2 years. Just to reiterate, go ahead, Kathy, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you for letting us come, and I really, really appreciate the way you run a meeting. So this has been very refreshing to see.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. So just so we're all on the same page, my minutes reflect that Mr. Purple told us that the number 2 position that they want to hire, and I assume he speaks for Mr. Montillo as well, is to provide, and this is in your minutes from May 12th, redundancy, coverage, and expertise. The position would be in the nature of a system administrator help desk function, which would leave funding for some additional part-time help. The position doesn't currently exist in the SAP, and they'll be coming to see us. I have had discussions. I have reported this to the board. I had a discussion with the chair of the Municipal Technology Committee, Matt Probst. I saw the presentation by another female member. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. I could not be more impressed with the citizens who volunteered to help bring us into the 21st century. And one of the things I directly said to Mr. Probst, my only role is to open up the SAP and see where we can help people. We have an IT manager position. It doesn't say we can only have one IT manager. And I understood from my discussion with Mr. Probst, at least as far as the expertise and the salary, that they envision the skill set we would need would fit into having another person at that level, at the IT manager level. So just to be clear, the board hasn't heard any requests. There's nothing in the SAP that says we only have one manager. It doesn't say the one and only director of IT. There is a manager position. And again, I've only spoken to MTC. I haven't spoken to Mr. Montijo about his needs. I haven't spoken to Mr. Purple. It seems to me that's not the direction they're going in. But if I understand what advisory is saying, what Ms. Cook is saying, that would be something that should be explored, bringing in someone else at the level of manager. So just so this is on the record. Yeah, I saw Mr. Rubenstein first, then Ms. Jazinski. Mr.
Okay. And Mark, I heard your point that because we don't know if there's going to be a fall town meeting, but why can't we proceed as if there is going to be a fall town meeting so that if there is one, we can get this done then instead of just saying, well, we don't know, so we'll kick the can down the road. What concerns me is you're talking about bringing in someone as a contractor. Are you going to pay that person as a W-2 or as a 1099?
I'll defer to Brian on that as to how we would pay, whether they be paid as a W-2 or 1099. I would think they'd have to be paid as a 1099, correct, Brian?
Well, it depends. If they're showing up for work every day and using our offices and our equipment, they're an employee. So
That's my concern, that you can call this person a contractor, but they're legally an employee. And if they're legally an employee, they're covered by the SAP. So I'd rather do this right and see if we can get it done at a fall town meeting than trying to play sort of fast and loose here with a contractor just so we don't have to deal with it.
But then that means we're waiting to hire somebody for another 5-6 months.
Well, I mean, there's no perfect answer, but we run into this, as you know, we run into this often because of how we have to get town meeting to approve these things. So it's a problem. But I mean, I just would like to do things to the extent it's possible by the book, if you will.
Barry, I'm so glad you said what you did say. It's so confusing when the word contract's used. And I always say either independent contractor or employee with a contract, and then we know what you're talking about, because that's the first thing I do too. Is he W-2 or 1099? When Brian a minute ago said, oh, he can have benefits, I thought, how can a 1099 have benefits? But now I think he's assuming he's a W-2. So now I understand why he said what he did, but it's very confusing when you use the word contractor in my world. So if you use the word independent, I understand it's a 1099. If you say employee with a contract, I understand it's a W-2.
I'm going to say thank you, Ms. Cook. I'm going to say for the record as chair of personnel board, I would be very disappointed if someone who's masterminding this plan can't tell me the difference between an independent contractor and a W-2 employee. There is no such thing as an employee for the IT department who, as Barry noted, is not under the SAP. So moving forward, for the record, and this is to everybody that I'm looking at, if we could please say, as Ms. Cook says, independent contractor, understand that's a 1099. They are not benefited and they are outside the jurisdiction of my board. If you're going to hire an employee, you're going to pay them benefits. They're going to be a W-2. If they're within a department that's under this board, then you're not hiring an independent contractor. I don't know any clearer way to say it. It's very frustrating to me. I went around and around and around a similar issue with the Board of Health, and it's just not necessary. We all need to get on the same page about it. So thank you, Barry. Thank you, Kathy. We're not going to talk about contracts anymore. We're going to say individuals with contracts, employees with contracts, and we're going to say independent contractors. And I don't know where the authority to hire an employee for the IT department would come outside of the SAP. Are we all in agreement that it would have to be under the SAP?
Well, it's not under the SAP right now. And we do not, as a personnel board, do not hire. So this is beyond our purview, this discussion. We don't hire, and we don't have a job description in front of us. And yes, we can when someone presents that to us, we can have this discussion. But I mean, if you're gonna put them in a Schedule A and you're gonna make a job description, that's great. But we can't decide whether we need this or don't need this on this board. That's not our purview. That's not our job.
No, Dorian, I'm sorry if I misspoke. I'm saying there can be no hiring of an employee for an employee, W-2 paid employee benefits. Obviously, we don't handle the hiring,
Right.
but we will not approve a salary, and they cannot become an employee unless they're under the SAP.
Right, with the job description. Yes, and that
Yes.
needs to take place before this board can really take action or do anything.
Were it not for the money piece, they could hire someone as an IT manager tomorrow.
Under contract.
No, as an employee, the position exists under the SAP for as many IT managers as you want to hire.
So how does that work for Betsy? How does that work for the Board of Health?
What do you mean?
So you've
I'm
got,
saying the confusion about 1099 versus W-2. I've seen it in other contexts, and I just want to get it out there. Kathy noted it, Barry noted it. Two kinds of folks in the world.
yeah, I think some of those comments aren't apples to apples, so we can
Fair
have.
enough. Let's leave the Board of Health out of it. Let's talk about IT. We're
Yes,
all in agreement that there's an IT manager position in the SAP. It does not preclude hiring a second person as a manager in the IT department, correct?
you are correct.
Okay, thank you. And likewise, as you talked about, you don't really want to have to rig a position, but there are other general positions, business administrator, that can be used across departments. What I'm concerned about, and I want to be clear, is the use of, when you said with the person have benefits and Brian said yes, and Mark is thinking they're an independent contractor and Brian's thinking they're an employee, and we're not hearkening back to the SAP. And I just want to bring us back to that.
It's not currently an SAP employee, Betsy. We
What
don't
is
even have, we don't have an established an employee yet. We're talking about a position that is not even created yet. There is funding, and we're determining how that structure is. And I appreciate Ms. Cook's comment, that she made about Mr. Montijo's predecessor, that, she respected Mr. Laflamme and gave him deference. I really wish that the same respect and deference would be given to Mr. Montijo, who was hired to manage the department. So
Mr. Montijo was hired to determine the needs of the town, but it doesn't exceed we still have to have the positions in the SAP there. I don't like the suggestion that someone isn't respecting anybody. We have positions in the SAP. It's a bylaw and we have to adhere to that.
Has Mr. Montijo, I'm sorry if I messed his name up, has he requested another person full-time? Have we gotten the request from the manager? I'm sorry, I disagree with Betsy saying that we could have more than one manager. A manager is the person who's in charge of that department. So we have facilities manager, we have DPW manager, we have the managers. That's the person who's in charge. And you have the people who work under them. So I don't agree with the SAP allows more than one manager in this department. And I think that the gentleman we just hired, if he wants another full-time person, he needs to come forward and ask for this full-time person. It's not up to our advisory board or a personnel director or anybody else in town to say, no, you have to have this person. Have we heard from him? And has this been a request from him?
Okay, I'm going to
That's a
stop
simple
Dorian
question.
there.
It's just a yes or no answer.
Okay.
Has he requested it?
I'm going to stop Dorian there. You are free to agree or disagree with me about my interpretation of the bylaw. And I apologize to the board. I didn't realize it was even an issue. So when something comes before us, if this issue comes up, we'll have a full and fair discussion. I have one opinion, Dorian has another. Mr. Purple is the town administrator and the personnel director. He is Mr. Montijo's supervisor. He is an authorized representative to come here to talk about what Mr. Montijo's needs are. I would not expect that Mr. Montijo has to file a separate request to come to the board meeting. And I
asked
will-
a very simple question, Betsy. Has he come forward asking for another full-time person in his department? That's
to
the
Mark
question I
or
asked.
to this board?
I just want a yes or no answer to my question.
To who? Come forward to who?
Has Mr. Montego come forward to Mr. Purple and asked that he wants another full-time person? Has that request come from that department?
Mark, you can answer the question. Fine, go ahead.
In budget discussions, there has, Mr. Montijo has been discussing a second person. So, but the crafting of that position is not yet done. There has been input from all parties. And I know that Mr. Montijo is working with MTC, and getting their input before anything moves forward. So, at this point, a position, but in terms of the scope of the position, no.
Okay,
I just
Thank
think
you,
he should be
everybody.
present for this conversation. I just think he should be present for this conversation. I'm sorry,
I just
I'm
had one
listening.
question.
I'm
if I could.
listening very carefully and he should be here. If this is what he wants and we're discussing this, the gentleman who's requesting the help, he should be part of this conversation. I don't think we should be discussing this without him.
thank you,
Can
Ms.
I just-
Kaczynski.
I just want it on the record.
I think this
Please
board
stop
needs
cutting me
to-
off, Betsy.
Can I just
Stop
ask one
cutting me
question?
off.
Dave, I
I
see
just
your
want,
hand.
I
Go
just
ahead,
wanted to ask-
Dorianne. I see your hand in 1 minute. Dorianne, I apologize if you felt cut off. Please finish
was
your
cut off.
statement.
Go ahead. It's fine. Go.
Okay. I'm assuming for purposes of these meetings that Mr. Purple would not represent anything for the IT department and its manager that he has not fully vetted with the manager. I will leave that to Mr. Purple as Mr. Montijo's supervisor to decide when and where he needs to be present at a meeting. It's a public meeting, but it's not for me to contact an employee. This is on the agenda. That's all I'll say. Mr. Nixon, please.
I just wanted to ask Mark if there was any discussion prior to Mr. Monteo accepting the position of it, the possibility of him having an assistant, either part-time or full-time.
No.
No?
Like I said, I'm not even sure why this discussion is on the agenda today. There's nothing before Personnel Board. This is premature, and it does nothing but try to taint whatever gets put together and does get put before Personnel Board.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
I don't think it
Mr.
taints
Purple, are
anything.
you done? I'm gonna stop there. I don't really like it when people start talking about other people and tainting stuff. As a courtesy, we don't see advisory very often. I'm an open meeting kind of person. I will open up a discussion if somebody wants to say something. I think we've gone as far as we need to go on this. It was a minor item on our agenda. Personnel Board does need to get to the performance evaluations. Mr. Purple is correct in that there is nothing before us, so I don't want to continue. This discussion is obviously very important to the town, and I'm going to stop having it right now until we have something before us to decide, okay? Does that work for Ms. Jazinski? And I'm just going to ask the members of the board if they have anything further that they would like to tell folks they would like to hear or see. We understand Ms. Jazinski would like Mr. Montijo to be present when this does come forward. That seems to be a reasonable request, Mr. Purple, if it works for you. Gentlemen, do you have anything else on this? Otherwise, I'm gonna let us move on. Everybody good? Okay, thanks. We need to get on to performance evaluations.
I'm saying bye.
All right, thank you, Ms.
Thank
Cook,
you.
again.
Thank you.
Very much for your
See
time. We
everybody
appreciate it.
too.
Okay, everybody, I'm gonna let everybody take a 2-minute break, and then we will do the performance evaluations. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Great. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes. All right, we're back in 2 minutes, but we have no host, so we won't continue until we have someone to host us. I guess it's a 3-minute break. Welcome back. Thank you to our Zoom host for coming back to the meeting. Much appreciated. All right. I don't know if Mr. Purple, Mr. Valentine, we've got a quorum, so we will get back to our agenda. Thank you. I don't think I officially said on the record, but on the matter of the IT department, we will table that until a request comes before us. That's agreeable to the board.
Yeah.
We'll table that item till a request comes before us. All right, we're on 5, new business, employee performance evaluations and salary increases. I actually have 2 items on the agenda. I don't know if we'll get to B. The board can decide after we finish up on A. All right. So there is nothing in the packet on this item. The performance evaluations are still considered confidential. They were provided to board members via a link to the secure OneDrive. Again, I'll just set the table. So we'll all have the same information, and then I will open it up to the board for discussion on the substance of the reviews. One is missing reviews. Some of the reviews will be coming in on June 23rd and maybe even a few on July 14th. If you didn't see a review in the folders, that was due to extenuating circumstances. In consultation with Ms. Hale, given some difficulties, I personally, on behalf of the board, granted reviewers an extension. I will say the reviewers were very responsive and responsible about getting the evaluations to me and Vanessa. And I think with the exception of EDC, library, town clerk, and part-time police dispatchers, we got everything in. So thank you. Thank you. That's the second section. It takes a village to pull these all together. Yes, Ms. Hale. I can't hear you. Are you muted? We don't hear you. I don't hear you. Mark Purple is the host now. Mr. Purple, did you want to unmute? I got a pop-up that said you're the host now. Vanessa was having technical difficulties.
Well, this is an upgrade. I can't promise your service level from this point forward, but
I don't know what she was going to say, but I will just continue with my remarks, and when she comes back, she'll come back. So I was just saying reviewers were responsive and responsible. We had a few exceptions, and the board will see them. And a missing folder does not mean something is amiss. Thank yous. It took a village to pull these together. I thank the village. I wanted to thank, I'm the chair of the board that's tasked with pulling these together and reviewing them. So it's my job to thank the folks who participated. Vanessa for collecting and cajoling and uploading. In the uploading, she was assisted by Katie Berry. Kristen Pasicane and payroll for quality checking all of the cover sheets. Brian, because we know he did something, but we don't always know exactly what it is, but we know he did something. And thanks to any reviewers, department heads, chairs of committees who may be listening now or will listen to this in the future. Thank you. A couple of technical issues. I got scattered reports of reviewers having some issues with the form. On one of them, you may have noticed in one of the departments, the start date field, which is very helpful. Kept reverting to the current date that the department head was trying to fill in the date the person started, and the form kept making them say June 1st. So I consulted with Ms. Hale and Ms. Esposito. I have determined the best way forward on that, and I will follow up with the department heads and Ms. Esposito. She is very capable, and we'll fix up anything that needs fixing on the form. And if we need more assistance from somebody beyond that, I'm sure Ms. Esposito will seek it. The second technical issue, and more importantly, 2 out of 5 members of the board reported system or device issues with connecting with the OneDrive, and that is concerning. However, I didn't learn about them until yesterday. I would ask these folks to continue to explore with Mr. Montiel and IT what went wrong. My own sense of this is if you're using a device that is mobile, the best way to get to the bottom of it is to take your device to the IT manager so they can see what interface issue you're having. It's really hard to do these remotely when the person doesn't have access. The rest of it is beyond me. I leave it to the members of the board who had an issue and to Mr. Montiel. I have great confidence in all of you. All right, now on to the comments on the reviews themselves. You may have noticed, I think there's some redundancies in the form itself. Section 1, 2 bullet points seem to address, at least to me, the same area. And so I was confused when reviewers had a different comment. The 2 bullet points, one says, demonstrates expertise and skill and knowledge within areas relevant to work. And then 2 dots down, it says, acquires and maintains skill and knowledge required for the work. Little redundant, that in and of itself wouldn't be an issue, except that reviewers often gave a different grade. I actually saw one, and I think that said exceptional skill and knowledge and meets expectations on acquires and maintains. So maybe that's something this board should look into in the future. I also thought there was redundancy between section 2 productivity and section 4 collaboration. They both seem to ask the same question about an employee's willingness to take on extra work when required. So that's just a note. Some of you may have noted that. Okay, reviews overall. I'm going to stop talking now and let the board members share their impressions and comments on the form. And then if anybody's still interested, I will share mine. Board members, comments?
I guess excuse me, I'll start.
Please.
For me, it's just sort of a repeat of last year. No one seems to have gotten the message that this board was trying to send in terms of the fact that we expected to see what I would term more honest evaluations. I don't think there's a single line item on a single review where someone did not at least meet expectations. So we have a workforce, so everyone is doing every aspect of their job proficiently. And I've never run across such a workforce in my life, in my experience, but I guess SoCro is different. And in fact, there were less than a handful of employees who overall got just meet expectations. So it's just unbelievable. So my conclusion is that we're spending a lot of time beating a drum that no one wants to listen to. And, you know, I think we have to revisit what role we want to continue to play in this process going forward. That's my overall impression.
Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. Dorian has made me aware that I need to be very careful that people are done with their comments. I tend to try to push us along. So I appreciate your comments. I want to make sure you're done speaking. And thank you to Dorian for staying on me. It's your friends that have your back and tell you when you're screwing up. So Barry, you're finished?
I'm finished.
Thank you. Other members of the board who wish to comment? Dorian, you have all afternoon. Speak. No, I'm sorry. I'm just joking. Mr. Nixon had his hand up. Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'll yield to the lady.
No, you had your hand up. I'm good. I was muted.
Oh, okay. No, well, I agree with Barry because basically we have the exceptional, exceeds, above, and meets. There were no needs improvements. And it just seems like with the exception of one that I've seen so far, everybody got the maximum percentage of increase, regardless of how many excellence or lack of excellence or lack of exceptionals that they had. And I guess if we're going to continue to use the system, is there a way that we could convert the rating to a numerical figure? Would that make any difference in terms of scoring? Because in the absence of being able to get any needs improvements, which I find totally improbable and almost impossible to have any employee in an organization that doesn't need improvement, I think we're dealing in an exercise in futility. Period.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. I'm not laughing at you.
Well, you can.
I was
You can.
smiling because it's something, anyway, doesn't matter. I was not laughing. I was smiling at something you said. Anyway, yes, Ms. Jasinski.
I am in complete agreement with the gentleman. I'm actually quite disappointed, and I'm not going to say any more than that. I do have some issues with some of the cover sheets not being completely filled in correctly, missing signatures, names of reviewers, and such. So I think I should probably call attention to those, and they need to be done correctly. And since the reviews weren't done to what I don't know. I mean, they're not my employees. I don't work with them directly, but overall, I was disappointed that everything is just a glowing review and nobody's doing anything wrong. I just have a hard time believing that. I have to trust the department heads that they're doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, but I don't know. I just have a hard time believing that we have the most perfect employees in the world. I'd like to think that's great. That's awesome because I love the employees. I think they're all pretty awesome, but I'm disappointed. So I'm not going to say any more than that. I do have 3, 4, 5 cover sheets, 6 cover sheets that were not done completely or correctly. So how do you want that handled? Do you want me to just give you a list of them or what?
Yes, if you would.
They need to be corrected. They need to be corrected.
All right. If I understood you correctly, Dorian, you would like the form adhered to. I understand what you're saying. It was a product of many discussions over a period of year. We wanted signatures in certain places. The form speaks for itself. So if you have forms that are non-compliant and you would like to hold them,
yes,
we will hold those upon receipt of the documentation that is satisfactory to you. If you want to tell me who they are, I actually am working off a list that I prepared. I will read it into the record when we're ready for a vote. So I will hold those items. So why don't you tell me the reviews that you would like held, and they will be held till the next meeting.
So I have one question. On one of the reviews, we have a typed signature on a cover form. That's not, I don't think that should be accepted. I think it should be an actual signature. So I'm just going to call attention to that one.
Well, I do know, all I know is in the case of the clerk's office, I'm no longer allowed to sign anything because in terms of making them ADA compliant and readable, we are now going to typed signature. That said, these are not public documents. So
Well,
why don't I hear from
one of their reviews is signed and the other is typed. The reviewer had to have spoken to the employee. The employee had to have signed the document. I'm not sure why there's not a signature and it's typed, but I would like these documents signed by the reviewers. They should be signed.
That's the only one that was at
It's
two
one,
point five.
it's just one that I have, yeah, it's just one, so.
Why don't you just give me a list of the non-compliant ones? Vanessa and I will work in that we have 2 weeks and we'll get them compliant. No
Okay.
problem. Tell me the ones you want held, please.
Okay,
By name.
in the DPW, Gene Johnson,
DPW, Gene Johnson.
you want to
hold.
know what I'm questioning?
It's missing a signature, an initial.
It's a
a
type,
yeah,
it's a type signature on reviewer, needs to be a signed signature.
Okay.
Then we go to Denise Mayer in the Recreation Department. There are no comments from the employee. That is a requirement of this review. And whether they write, agree with review, don't agree, or no comment, something, they need to put something down. It is a requirement of the review. That needs to be corrected. Let's see, Lorraine.
just to make sure, because I'm gonna make a list. I'm not gonna even wait till I listen to this meeting again to do the minutes. Johnson is a signature issue.
Yep, Mayor
Mayor is no
is employee
comment.
comments, right?
Yeah, because Vanessa and I will get right on these. Okay, the next one?
Lorraine Caporali, it's more of a technical thing. The name of the reviewer is not listed on this. It's not typed in, but the signature is on the bottom, but that needs to be corrected. It's just a technical thing. And I have the same thing for Leslie Chamberlain. The reviewer is not listed, and there is absolutely no signature on this review page, which needs to be corrected.
Chamberlain needs 2 things, a
Yes,
signature and a
reviewer
name.
typed in at the top and a signature on the bottom.
All right,
Then we have Ryan Newell. Name of the reviewer is a date, which is not good. So I need to know the name of the reviewer. There are no employee comments. Again, that has to be filled in. And the signature is there for the reviewer. I know who the reviewer is, but if you don't know the signature, you don't know who it is. So that just needs to be typed at the top and in employee comments. And then Tammy Rice, again, in DPW, I'm sorry.
can you just stop for 1 minute? I'm transferring these over to my list so I hold them appropriately. And I'm making notes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and now we're back to DPW. Yes.
Yeah,
ma'am.
sorry. I had that.
No,
on the
no,
bottom.
no problem.
Again, there are no employee comments. It is a requirement. It needs to be filled in. Even if it
Thank
says
you.
no comment, but they need to put something.
Okay. And I would add, because I want to treat everybody the same, hold Julianne Lammy in building zoning. I don't believe Ms. Lavoli signed that review. Oh, no, sorry, that was Kate Berry. So on Kate Berry, I have a question, Mr. Purple. The date on the review says the employee was hired. Let me make sure I get this, because I don't know if anybody else had a question about Kate Berry. So
I have it
Kate
here.
was working in building zoning. Her review appears, it was uploaded to the Board of Selectmen's file. It says her reviewer is Lori Lavoli, Mark Purple, but it is not signed by Lori Lavoli. And it says current, start date and current position is 5/10/21. That is outside the review period. The review period is July 1st, 2020 to April 30, 2021. So my first question is, where was Miss Berry working during this review period? If her hire date in her current position was 5/10/21, what department and who were her reviewers?
So, Madam Chair, just, we had this conversation just the other day. You pointed out my deficiencies. I've got a revised cover sheet coming forward to address the concerns that you expressed to me. But to answer your question specifically, she was working in the ZBA office at the time officially. But as of January of this year, which was within the review period, she was transferred up into the selectman's office. So the review is jointly between Ms. Lavoli and myself. I think that's reflected in the comments. So the changes are being made to the cover page to reflect that, as well as being signed by Ms. Lavoli and myself.
Great. Thank you for your responsiveness, Mr. Purple. I will hold this so we're consistent. and we'll vote that on the 23rd. Again, no ill will reflected toward the employees. It's a form. It needs to be complied with. Nobody's losing their raise because of any of these technical deficiencies, but they're important to have them in the record. So I have holds on Katie Berry, Ryan Newell, Jean Johnson, Tammy Rice, Denise Mayer, Lorraine Caporelli, and Leslie Chamberlain. And that should address all the concerns.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And those will be on the list for June 23rd. All right, any other board? Mr. Nixon?
Yeah, I just, and this is not really, trust me, it's not to put you on the spot, Mark, but as a town manager and basically you see everybody performing their jobs on a daily basis. Do you agree with the fact that on the basis of the reports submitted by department heads and everything, we have no employees that need improvement?
I think all employees need improvement. However, I think that when you look at the, the grading, we talk about, expectations. And, whether you meet expectations or you need improvement, I think are two different things. And the one comment that you made earlier, which I thought was interesting about, do we want to look at going, doing maybe a numerical system? People had commented, I think one of the original iterations with this this grouping of the personnel board, we took a look at the evaluation form, was employees wanted to get away from the numbering system because people seem to focus on the numbers. Well, geez, I should be a 4 instead of a 3 or a 2.5, and people didn't want to say a 1, 2, or 3. They wanted to be a 2.5, right? 3.5. I'm not quite this good, but I'm better than this. And for us to go back that way, if we can find, and again, we're getting back to another conversation about if we can find a way to look at trying to assess, merit, which we can do fairly and equitably, I'm all in.
Do you think there's a way of marrying the two systems to have both a descriptive rating and the numerical somehow intertwined? I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I try to, in the reviews that I do, I put more value in the comments than I do in the rating systems. When I meet with the employees, that I do reviews for, the comments are really more where the discussions are than the reviewing. Do I think that I'm a meets, expectations? Do I exceed expectations type of thing? It's more in the comments, which I think is what carries the day. But the issues that we've had about trying to do something in terms of merit is that, and I think the chair identified this earlier. She mentioned the word silos, and silos are really the one thing that makes it difficult for us to do something that's fair and equitable across the board, because given the different appointing authorities, and I appreciate the fact that you opened up your comment and referred to me as a town manager. People make that mistake a lot. And if it was true, it would streamline some of these discussions, I think, when it comes to, how to put something in place that could be equitable.
I'm going to thank both of the gentlemen and say, I do not want to have a discussion about merit today. I want to confine the discussion to how what the board saw, how they feel. I want to have a vote. We did talk about bringing numbers. I don't want to go back through what everybody said because I don't have that memory. I'm happy to go back through the minutes and remind everybody exactly who said take out numbers. Numbers aren't good. I would like to focus on today's task, and then I very much want to have a discussion about what we want to do in the future. I think Barry said it very well. Revisit, words to the effect of let's revisit what our role is in the process. So thank you for the question, and I'd like to defer the subject of, we don't have a merit system right now. It is perhaps relevant in some of our minds, but I want to stick to what's in front of us today, if you don't mind. Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Hale. Can't hear you. Cannot hear you, ma'am. Do you want to go sit with Mark? Are you in the same building? Why don't you go pull a chair up to Mark's desk and we want to hear what you have to say.
Wait a minute, this meeting has been long enough and now I've got to sit with Vanessa?
You do, sir.
Yeah. She could sit with Brian. Brian's got a bigger table.
He's upstairs. You're on the same floor.
Oh, no, it's
Hi,
too late. He's
Kristen.
here already.
Minor. No, it's minor. I just wanted to let the rest of the other board members, other than the chair, know that when we were getting the reviews, I raised with the chair that some employees did not fill out the comment section on that cover page, you know, to your point, Ms. Jasinski, and we agreed we wanted to wait and see if the rest of the board was, you know, hard and fast about that. But I just wanted you to know that, you know, that was duly noted that not everybody filled in that comment section.
Mhm.
Just for the record, thank you, Miss Hale. Miss Hale was real, for some reason, even though the guidance that went out said, send the reviews to Betsy and Vanessa. In 90% of the cases, Vanessa was the sole recipient. We communicate on a weekly, twice weekly basis. She let me know there were deficiencies. I didn't want to substitute my judgment for that of the board. And that proved to be a very good judgment because some of you care very deeply about things that I may not. And so we, just as Vanessa said, brought it to the board, heard from you, and those deficiencies will be corrected. But I did want to know that Vanessa did keep me apprised when things would come in. And she didn't catch all of it, just as I didn't catch all of it. And so working together, we catch these issues. Any other board members on substance of reviews before we finish up? So I'll just add, I'm generally in agreement with what I heard. I do want to say observation overall, two things hit me when I read all these as a group. And I will say I did create, I'm not sharing it with anybody. It's not a public document, but just a little score sheet. And there's 36 of them in my little packet, one for each review. So I could look line by line. I have little codes, E for exceptional, A for above. And I went through every review. I circled what the manager circled so I could tally it all up, and because it's hard to go in and out of 36 reviews. I also compared every review to last year on the subject of goals. Overall impression. Number one thing that came through all of these is the upheaval of routines due to COVID. And we all know this, we all experienced it in our personal as well as our professional lives. I saw the comments to the effect multiple times, hard to measure productivity during COVID. It's difficult for me to say anything about that because everyone has a different job. We have department heads whose job it is to run programs for the town. I imagine COVID interrupted them. For some departments, nothing could change. For the police and fire, they had to keep going regardless of COVID. Every department has a different slant on COVID. So I don't know how to process the comments about COVID. I'm at a loss as to know what to do with that. So many employees working from home, so much upheaval. Perhaps this year isn't even the best year. But that said, the employees got paid and we have to decide their raises based on their performance during COVID. So somehow we have to deal with that. Secondly, what came through very strongly to me is the dedication of all our employees, to the departments, to the town, to the teams, to customer service, to each other. And that's great. The number one thing I saw exceptional time and time again was willingness to work extra time on projects, help other people out. What I came away with was a feeling that people were writing letters of recommendation for family members, people who are so close to them that they feel like family. I don't know if the word family is used in the reviews, certainly team, atmosphere came through time and time again. And I feel perhaps that it's that overarching sense of family or team that leads to no criticism, because I saw zero criticism in these reviews. There are 36 reviews on my checklist. There are 28 individual rankings in 4 sections. excluding managers. That doesn't even talk about managers who have a whole separate field. Let's just say 36 employees, 4 groups of rankings, 28 individuals. And I did the math. That was 1,008 fields. I did it 3 times on my calculator. 36 reviews, 28 rankings, 1,008 opportunities for someone to circle that someone less than met expectation, that there was something that didn't meet expectations and something that was unsatisfactory. And as others have noted, I just did the math. 0 out of 1,008. There were occasions where a reviewer mentioned an issue, but there was absolutely no context to it in terms of the employee's suggestion that the employee could have done better. Noted that a few employees have the type of job that leads them to have to enforce permits, bylaws, thus making them unpopular or controversial. There were mistakes that were made this past year. I know about them. Other people know about them. Maybe everybody doesn't know about them. A couple of them popped up in a review here and there, but with absolutely no consequence. Nothing that said, I took this employee aside and we're going to work on it, and it didn't meet my expectations. I hope that's happening in private conversation. Maybe the managers don't feel comfortable discussing it with us. I certainly hope it's happening in private conversation. This board talked over a period of a year about wanting to see a statement by the manager of what the person needs to improve on. And again, I don't want to put Mr. Purple on the spot. His fingerprint is on a lot of these because he's the town administrator. He works for the Board of Selectmen, and a lot of these departments report to him. Obviously, the handful of boards and committees do not. Planning, COA has somebody reviewing them, library trustees we haven't seen yet. But a lot of these fall under the purview of Mr. Purple and the Board of Selectmen. And what I didn't see anywhere in those is that a manager was spoken to either about, how can I put this? We didn't add a field that said, tell us directly what this person needs to improve on. We shouldn't have to do that. Somebody who manages people professionally, they should know that as part of their job, that they need to put that someone needs to improve on something. We all need to improve. When we ask people, we all say we know someone needs to improve, but it's not reflected in any of these reviews. Enough said. To the managers who are listening or may listen, there was great inflation. Repeatedly, and I found this when I did my checklist, managers checked off an overall rating that was not supported by the individual ratings on their own sheet. For example, one manager, and I will not mention their name, gave above expectations as an overall rating on the cover page. When you look to that section, 5 out of the 6 qualities in the section were only meets expectation. And one of them was above average. So that tells me that that person either prizes everything else in that section above everything else, or they just weren't paying attention. Same thing with several people checked off above expectations in the leadership category, but then there were no comments on leadership because that section wasn't applicable. So I just wonder how many people are even paying attention to the form or what they check off on the front page that doesn't comport with what they put in the other sections. We have truly exceptional employees, or employees who are sometimes exceptional in some aspect of their job, but that's not going to get accounted for when, with very few exceptions, everyone was either above average or exceptional. And I don't want to embarrass somebody. They know who they are. They called out employees who just meet expectations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then again, those people should be told what they could do to improve if you're looking for more than meets expectations. If everybody's above expectations, nobody, we all know what the problems are. Another thing was goals, and then I'll be done. But I feel like if I'm going to criticize as a manager, in a sense, I need to give specifics. I noted overall goals is something that stymies people. Again, nobody got a needs improvement or doesn't meet expectations, but a vast majority of employees meets expectations, which in our system seems to be the lowest thing that is given, on meeting goals and deadlines. And the employees were typically rated exceptional or above in other categories: dedication, public service, willingness to take on work. But goals seem to be something that eluded them, or they meet expectations. But we know in our system that means what that means. I also noted that the managers, many of them didn't seem to track the goals from last year. So the personnel board had in its possession the FY20 reviews from last year and this year. So if you wanted to, you could compare them. So for those who may be listening but didn't see the form, there is a table on last year's review. It says prior year and next year. So if I'm looking at an FY20 review for a table, the table says next year's goals, and the manager listed 3 or 4 goals last year that the person wanted the person to accomplish next year. Well, folks, we're in next year. FY21 is next year. And the goals, sometimes they just disappeared. We went from FY20 to FY21, and I can sit down with anybody who doubts this. Look at them, the goals just went away. We didn't track them from one year to the next. If managers aren't tracking goals, how are employees going to track goals? The second thing is I call rolling goals, and this was prevalent. Goals were listed last year with a deadline, and if you go back to FY19, same goal with a different deadline. This year we see them. We didn't lose the goal, but we kept changing the goalpost. I understand there are circumstances, there are reasons why goals don't get met, particularly in a pandemic. Let's talk about that. So the two things coupled together, employees are not exceeding at their goals and managers are losing the goals, or the goalposts keep changing. So the bottom line is that's a long way of saying, I feel like I need to give that detail rather than just say I agree with everybody. That's some of the specifics about why I agree. Nothing has changed. I don't feel we moved the needle 1 inch from last year. As no other figure shows that better than 1,008 fields, and nobody needs improvement in any of them. I think this seems to be beyond the current capability of our system or the culture of our system. I don't think that I have come to the conclusion after 4 years that more training is not the answer. Since I've been on the board, we've talked about this for 4 years. We've invested $3,600 or so of taxpayer money, and nothing has changed. So I have concluded that the people that do this day in and day out, who could be our partners in change, for whatever reason are incapable or unwilling to change. So I'm going to ask the board members to do something my dear departed father, J. Dexter Rosenblum, attorney at law, would say. Please meditate and cogitate on this. Think about it, and at a future meeting, I'm open to when that meeting would be. I want to do exactly what Barry suggested to us. I want to discuss what our role will be in performance reviews moving forward. I have some strong opinions about that. So I don't know when the board, I'd like to get to the raises for today. I don't know when you guys would like to discuss this again. Do you want to do it in July? Is that reasonable? Just think about where you want to go with this in the future.
Yep.
July meeting work?
July's fine. Yep.
Okay, so let's table the future of performance or our role in performance evaluations to July. All right. Where I'm at is I think that this is a COLA raise. We've been given performance evaluations that show that in the opinion of the managers, people are meeting or exceeding expectations. I have no grounds not to give the raises. I just want to acknowledge at this point, they are COLA raises. That's what they are. With the twist that COLAs are automatic and these, we have received reviews. If anybody has any other comments, somebody can make a motion. And since the performance evaluations are not in the public record, the public will know. I'll have to read the list like I did last year, and I'm sorry to delay us even further. I don't think it would be appropriate to just say we're going to publish a list in our minutes, because then someone has to go dig for the minutes. So, are people ready to vote? Does anybody have any other comments? Seeing no comments, does someone want to make a motion to, or I'll make a motion to approve, the chair makes a motion to approve SAP employee raises for FY22 as follows. Corin Diaz, from a current rate of $28.03 to $28.81, 2.8%. Barbara Speary, Board of Assessors and Board of Health, from a current rate of $24.79 to $25.48, 2.8%. Kathleen Berry, from a current rate of $24.50 to $25.19, 2.8%. Lori Esposito, from a current rate of $30.45 to $31.30, 2.8%. Vanessa Hale, from a current rate of $44.48 to $45.73, 2.8%. Lori Lavoli, from a current rate of $47.31 hourly to $48.63, 2.8%. Conservation, Melissa Danza, $33.67 to a new rate of $34.61, 2.8%. Facilities, Robert Chavez, $41.42 to a new rate of $42.58 hourly, 2.8%. Francis Durkin, $28.09 to $28.88, 2.8%. Ronald Fraser, $27.50 to a new rate of $28.27, 2.8%. John Parent, $42.59 hourly to $43.78, 2.8%. Susan Wood, $27.38 to a new hourly rate of $28.15, 2.8%. Alicia Porter, $23.65 to $24.31, 2.8%. Christopher McGinn, from $24.80 an hour to $25.49, 2.8%. Sarah Hecker, $27.29 to $28.05, 2.8%. Karina Quinn, $41.34 to $42.50, 2.8%. Cynthia McLeod, $32.14 to $33.04, 2.8%. We have some holds. Tim Davis, $40.31 to $41.44, 2.8%. Cynthia Beard, $36.87. Oh, sorry, $35.87 current rate to $36.87, 2.8%. Pam LaFrancois, from a current rate of $41.88 to $43.05, 2.8%. Margaret Leonard, $31.08 to $31.95, 2.8%. Heidi Lindsay, $29.50 to $30.33, 2.8%. Carla McCullough, $43.75 to $44.98, 2.8%. David Beery, $25.79, $26.51, 2.8. Kristen Passaking, $28.23 to $29.02, 2.8. Sarah Castle, $37 an hour to $38.04, 2.8. To Megan Island, $28.13 to $28.92, 2.8%. Shannon Kanaman, $25.69 to $26.31, 2.8. Christina McCarthy, $21.39 to $21.99, 2.8%. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Second,
All right, this will be a roll call vote. Ms. Jazinski,
Aye.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Yes,
and the chair votes in the affirmative. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that. And again, to the employees who performed admirably during COVID, I wish there were a better way for us to sort out. But at present, this board doesn't have the capability other than to take these as a whole from the manager. So your manager knows when you were truly exceptional, and you know, and who's above average, and maybe at some point we'll get to, anyway, enough said. Thank you all. All right. There was one other matter on the agenda. I think I'll table it to a future meeting. It's very late in the day for us. And that is the self-evaluation form, bringing it back. It is in your packet. Please take a look, and we can discuss it in July when we discuss the future of the board and the performance evaluation. All right. Any other business before the board? All right, we have calendared a meeting for June 23rd. We will be meeting in person at the townhouse on the second floor as pre-COVID at noon time. And at that time, we'll discuss whether or not we're going to have our July 14th meeting at the same hour. Does anyone want to go ahead and schedule August?
Sure.
Vanessa, is that a good idea in terms of room availability?
She's gone.
Oh, okay.
There she is. Hi, Vanessa.
Does anyone want to discuss a date for August? Or do we want to wait until our next meeting when we're going to discuss if we're doing noontime or?
Yeah, and
Returning
we
to-
were waiting for vacation schedules too.
Right.
Yeah, all right. So let's table calendaring. We'll meet again on the 23rd to finish up the reviews. And we'll meet a regular meeting on July 14th. All right. Anybody have any other business for the board?
No.
All right.
Turn.
Keep that recording rolling. We are gavelled out. Vanessa, if you want to hang around for a couple minutes, just we'll figure out the loose ends. We are gavelled out at 2:30. I thank everyone for all their work. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.